I want to start with the moment that still wakes me up at night, the moment a pale hand rose from under the front desk and pressed the bell. The ding wasn't loud. It was soft, almost polite. That made it worse. It sounded like something a guest would do, except there was no guest. There was a crouched shape inches from my knees, hidden by wood and shadow, waiting for me to relax, waiting for me to forget that fear has a weight and it settles in you long before you recognize it. I worked the night shift at a small hotel, 3 floors, 40 rooms, usually less than half full on weeknights. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. was my routine. The front doors locked themselves at midnight. The buzzer sounded when someone wanted in, and I controlled the little silver button that let them through. It's funny how much power that feels like until you realize who you've let in. How easily one press of a finger can pull danger out of the fog and invite it to sit down. He arrived at 11. Mid-40s, tall, the kind of thin that looks like it used to be athletic, but got left out in the sun too long. Jeans, baseball cap, a backpack that didn't sag the way a real traveler's does. He asked for a room. I gave him a price. He slid over a card. The terminal chirped acceptance. Green light flashed, and I handed him a key to 214. He stared at me a little too long. Blank face, eyes not finding my eyes so much as measuring the space around them. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. The doors closed with a soft breath, and I told myself not to be dramatic. The lobby was an empty diorama of late-night quiet. Couches angled towards the TV I never turned on. Vending machines humming in the corner like bees that lost the hive. Behind me, the small office with my glass window and swivel chair. I did what I always did. Paperwork. The minutes dissolved. The air conditioner clicked. Somewhere down the hallway, a pipe groaned. The kinds of noises you stop hearing until they stop. When I looked up again, he was back. He didn't come to the desk. He didn't say anything. He walked past me and sat on the couch facing the dark TV, as if there were a movie only he could see. I waited for the usual signs of a restless guest. Phone in hand, restless leg, the sigh of someone killing time. Nothing. He sat with his shoulders pitched forward, hands resting on his knees, eyes dead ahead. 10 minutes, 15, 30. The room felt like it had eyes, and they were all on the side of my face. I crossed the lobby to the vending machine, pretending I needed water. As I stepped into his blind spot, his head tilted almost imperceptibly. I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. I felt the attention like a cold line drawn from my shoulder to my throat. Back behind the desk, my fingers shook a little as I twisted the cap off the bottle. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to check the system, to be a responsible employee, to ground myself in numbers and names in the inventory of rooms. Room 214, vacant. The word sat on the screen like a dare. I refreshed, still vacant. Check-in log, no entry for him. Transaction report, no charge, no hold, no card on file. For a second, I thought I'd pulled up the wrong day or clicked a different hotel by mistake, which is impossible because we only have the one. I picked up the phone and called 214. It rang until the ring became a tone and then silence. I checked the keycard log, that quiet little audit trail of timestamps and green lights. No entries tonight. No door opened. No guest in 214. I set the phone down slowly and looked up. He was there on the couch, the same posture, the same blank attention to an off TV, the same impossible stillness. I hated the way my heart stuttered and then tried to make up the beat. I told myself the system could glitch, even though it never had. I told myself sometimes cards approve and fail later, even though I'd never seen one pretend so cleanly. I told myself if I spoke to him, he'd become reasonable. Reason loves the sound of its own voice, even when danger is clear in its throat. I walked over and asked if everything was okay. He turned his head. His face was closer than I expected, like he'd leaned forward without moving. "Can't sleep," he said. His voice had no texture, no warmth, no cold, just a line of sound evenly poured. He turned back to the TV that wasn't on. I nodded like that was a conversation and retreated behind the desk because I needed the counter between us to mean something. Around 2, he vanished. Not out the door, the buzzer would have told me. Not to a room, the log would have admitted it. He melted out of my eye line like smoke and reassembled near the hallway to the bathrooms, half in shadow. Standing, not fidgeting, not using the bathrooms, not moving except for the slow swivel of his head when I pretended to check our nightly audit and use the reflection in the monitor to keep him in the corner of my eye. After a few minutes, he drifted back to the lounge and sat. The same position, the same silhouette, the same silence. I called my manager. She answered with the voice of someone who has been yanked out of a dream they will not remember. I explained. She told me to keep an eye on him and call the police if he did anything threatening. I said okay, because that's what you say when you're the employee and the other voice belongs to the person who signs your checks. But the truth is, the threat wasn't a knife or a shout or a broken bottle. The threat was time piling up around a man who wasn't supposed to be there. I watched the cameras. First floor hallway. He walked to the end, stood with his face to the far wall as if he could see through it, then came back. Stairwell. He disappeared into the concrete throat of it and stayed there for 10 minutes. Elevator bay. He stood beside the doors but didn't press the button like he was practicing being the kind of person who belonged near elevators. Vending machines. He stood at an angle just enough that the camera would catch his profile but not his eyes. Sometimes he lingered in the corner where the light didn't quite reach, the place you only notice when something darker than the dark stands in it. By 3:30, I couldn't hold the shape of myself anymore. I called the non-emergency line because I didn't want to be dramatic, because I'd been trained to triage my own fear. I explained. They said they'd send someone when they could. I thanked them like they'd done me a favor. While I waited, he drifted closer to the desk. 15 feet, 12, 10. He stopped at a distance that felt like the edge of a whisper. He watched me type nothing at all, not blinking much, not speaking. His chest rose and fell in shallow, patient tides. I kept my eyes on the monitor, but my peripheral vision was a scream. The buzzer sounded at 3:50. I thought, thank God, but it was just a guest coming back late, one shoe squeaking on the tile. I let him in and watched the man's eyes travel with the guest as he crossed the lobby. Slowly, meticulously, like he was reading him. It wasn't curiosity. It was study. It was the way people look at a door before they open it. A few minutes later, the camera showed him outside a guest room on the first floor. Not knocking, not trying the handle, just standing with his head tilted toward the peephole. I dialed 911 and heard my voice come out smaller than I meant it to. "He's outside a room," I said. "He's not a guest. He's been here for hours." They told me officers were on the way. The words should have felt like a rope to hold. They felt like a clock I had to live through. He came back to the lobby and finally approached the desk, leaning over the counter as if there were things we had to say to each other. "Any food?" he asked. The question was harmless. The voice wasn't. It was low, too low for the time of night, a sound that made you think of basements and hallways with no cameras. I told him there were vending machines, and he smiled in a way that added nothing to his face. Then he walked away, and I counted my breaths to the second hand on the wall clock, because numbers were still a place where things made sense. 4:10. 2 officers at the door, blue and red strobes painting the vending machines with temporary emergency. I let them in and pointed. He was sitting again as if he'd been asleep the whole time and I'd invented the night. They spoke to him softly, asked for ID. He answered in that flat pour of sound. Then they walked him out and the door closed as if the hotel could inhale again. One of the officers came back. He told me the card had been stolen. The man had no bags, no reservation. He wasn't a guest. He'd just been pretending. They charged him with trespass and the card, and it should have ended there. I nodded. I said, "Thank you." I kept my voice steady because the body does what it has to do to survive its own nervous system. When they left, the lobby collapsed into a silence that wasn't peace. It was the vacuum after a scream. I sat through the rest of my shift with the cameras flicking from angle to angle, expecting that every time the screen changed, I would see him again in the corner that doesn't belong to anyone, that he would have found a way to fold himself back inside the building like a note slid under a door. Dawn came like a dim mercy through the glass, and nothing else happened, which is not the same as saying everything was fine. The part that stayed with me wasn't the stolen card or the officers, or even the moment I realized 214 had never been occupied. It was the hours in between. How long he was inside with all that time, moving through hallways meant for people with keys, standing outside doors that didn't belong to him, watching me from angles I wasn't built to defend. It was the idea that while I was trying to decide if I was overreacting, he was practicing how he would do whatever he had come there to do. I went home that morning and locked my apartment door and sat in the kitchen chair with my shoes still on. I thought about the desk, about the hollow space under it that had always been just a shadow to me. I imagined him crouched there, the wood inches from his face, listening to my breathing, waiting for the exact second my shoulders released, the exact second the tension slid off my spine because I told myself I was being silly. I imagined his hand lifting, calm, smooth, practiced, and pressing the bell. Ding, a small sound that said, "I've been here the whole time." Weeks later, the normal noises of the hotel returned to being normal, at least to other people. The heater clicked. The AC sighed. The front door buzzed for late guests, and I let them in and watched them cross their names off the list of strangers. But at night, when the lobby was empty, I would catch myself staring at that gap under the counter, at the rectangles in the monitor where the light never quite reaches, and I'd feel the shape of the night settle in my chest again. It's not the big noises you carry with you. It's the small ones, the soft ones, the ones that sound like they're asking permission. People like to ask what I think he wanted. I don't know. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was something I shouldn't have to name out loud to make you understand it. What I do know is that buildings hold memory, like lungs hold air. And sometimes a place exhales a moment back at you when you least expect it. The desk, the couch, the vending machines. They're just furniture until someone sits in them wrong, until someone watches a TV that isn't on. I still work nights sometimes. The door still locks at midnight. The buzzer still sounds, and I still press the silver button. I still check people in and ask them how many keys they need and whether they want a late checkout. I still tell myself that fear is a tool, not a prophecy, but I also keep my eyes on the parts of the room I used to ignore. I check the logs even when I don't have to. I trust the feeling that stands up the hairs on the back of my neck like a row of tiny sentries. Because somewhere out there, someone is practicing stillness. Someone is learning how to look like furniture. Someone is tucking himself into the missing inches under a desk, waiting for a soft sound to change everything. And if you ever hear a bell at night, soft, polite, perfectly normal, ask yourself where the hand is. Ask yourself how long it's been there. And then listen to your fear, because sometimes fear isn't a story you tell yourself to pass the time. Sometimes it's the only honest thing in the room.